How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world. NDC Copenhagen is happening August 27th through the 31st. Go to ndccopenhagen.com for more information.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com.
Hey there. This is Jeff Fritz, the purple blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET. In 2002, the guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl's joined up with the folks from Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class at, are you ready? Get this, at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. Carl's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other, your partner with you, and you should, right? This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do, and Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristed region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Listen, space is limited and for very good reason. This is quality training in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2023. That's BLAZOR 2023 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Hey, guess what? It's time for .NET Rocks again. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell. Again?
Again. No, not more .NET Rocks. Show 1859. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I guess we got to make a plan for 1900.
Yeah, well, you're doing show 900 of Run As Radio soon?
Yeah, Run As 900 is the first week of October, so.
Wow.
And, yeah, I think we're just going to be a little silly, but that's fine. A half hour silly never hurt anybody.
Yeah. You guys are doing a good thing over there.
It's going great.
Yeah, well, Gary Ewan Park is here, and we're going to be talking Chocolatey, of course. And so I found something. The timing was perfect on this because I just learned about it a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah?
Roll the crazy music for Better Know Framework.
Awesome. All right, man, what do you got?
Our friend Simon Kropp from Down Under.
Yeah, Aussie.
Yeah, he wrote this great little tool called WinDebloat.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
A .NET tool that removes the bloat in Windows 11.
This seems awesome and scary at the same time.
Oh, it's so cool.
You've used it.
It's so cool. Yeah, and you can include or exclude things, but there's like a whole bunch of bloatware that's in there if you don't specify what to exclude.
Right.
There's just a whole bunch of stuff, Xbox, Game Bar, Xbox Game Speech Window. Do you ever use that in Windows?
No.
Yeah. All these widgets and whiteboard.
You know what I have been using is Clipchamp. Clipchamp's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
But Cortana can die. That's fine.
Yep. But you can tell which ones you want to exclude. So like you take the big thing, like Skype was on the list, and I actually use Skype to communicate with some guys in a
Still got a few folks left in the Skype world, huh?
Yeah, but he just added that feature. Okay, exclude Skype.
That's cool.
It's very cool. So yeah, I have a couple of machines around the house that I need to de-bloat. So
this is all stuff to add to your Chocolatey scripts, I suspect.
Yeah, it's kind of like the anti-Chocolatey, right? Chocolatey.
It puts stuff in and Deblo takes it out. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
You can do both at the same time, I think. That's called progress. Well, anyway, that's what I got.
Teams. How tempting.
How tempting.
I can't. I'm afraid I'm moving into Teams more and more and more. We're finally cutting off the old POTS lines that we used through the TLOS for .NET Rocks, back when that was a thing.
Oh yeah, I remember. Sure.
And so I've been lifting the phone numbers, putting them through a service called VoIP MS, and then forwarding them onto Teams calling. So now my phones actually ring on Teams. The main upside being you get to use a Teams office phone like a CCX 600, which is a very cool device.
Yeah. I was watching a baseball game yesterday. The Red Sox were playing Kansas City, and I just forgot, like in the dugout, the guy picks a phone off the wall with a little coily cord and holds it to his, I'm like,
what is he doing?
What is that thing?
It's not a thing. He's not really doing that thing.
That's enough of that. That's what I got. Who's talking to us, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1687. And that's a show we did with one Rob Reynolds. Maybe you've heard of him, about this product called Chocolatey. Nobody talks about this, but all the way back in 2020, which is one of the reasons I asked Gary back, because it's been a while since we've talked about this. And this particular comment comes from GA Progman. So I'm presuming the GA is like Georgia. But he says, and he's referencing something in the show. This is 1687, so a little while ago, where he says, it seems silly to say, but I'd recommend caution with clipboard history or any other of these clipboard tools. If you copy secrets like API keys and stuff, they'll sit in the history. Obviously true. Just as handy as history is, nothing is free. Yeah. But with regards to Chocolatey, as someone who spends a little more time with Linux ecosystems, I've always been confused as to why Windows doesn't have a package manager built into it. It's true. I mean, there's WinGet now, but we'll talk to Gary about that later. I love using Chocolatey on new machines to get them up and running very quickly, to the point where I've created a .NET Global tool, which I run on a fresh install of Windows, which, among other things like setting up group policies and such, leverages Chocolatey to install with the -y argument the majority of my required applications. But I'm going to have to look into the Chocolatey for Business, as I tend to reinstall Windows on a regular basis, wanting to remove X client IP from my machine when the contracts end. This is a cool idea. Yeah. That you can say to your customer as they're going out the door. It's like, I wiped my machine. Yeah. I'm not that I just uninstalled your stuff. I wiped my machine because I can rebuild it so quickly. Yep. I've been tempted to leverage Chocolatey in the DevOps pipeline in the past, but I've been concerned about app versions. I know that Chocolatey has support for version numbers, like install this version of a package. I know how easy it is for developers to install NPM packages and not bother to lock them down to specific versions. And I'm reluctant to simply hand that level of power over to the devs that I was working with. Then again, I have a Chocolatey package list with version numbers checked into source control. Look at this guy. Wow. And using that list when provisioning new devices, that would deal with that. Either way, there's lots to think about.
Yes, there is.
I don't know, Gary. That sounds like one heck of a customer for you.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah. GA Progman, thanks so much for your comment, and a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And you can follow us on Twitter if you want to, but the real fun is happening over on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot, Rudy toot toot, tootie root toot. You did hear Gary Park there for a minute chiming in. I know he was laughing in the background there, but just to introduce him quickly, he works full time on Chocolatey, the package manager for Windows, if you haven't figured that out by now. Welcome back, Gary.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes. I think it was Alan Stevens that introduced us to Chocolatey first, wasn't it, Richard?
Back in the day, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
And then it's one of those things you just regularly revisit every so often, if not often enough. I mean, what is the impact of WinGet in the Chocolatey world? Because in theory, Microsoft's sort of addressing this.
It's an interesting question. I mean, and it could be a whole topic in and of itself. If anyone's interested in kind of where we Chocolatey sit, my colleague Paul Broadwith recently did a talk comparing like for like Chocolatey to WinGet at PSConf EU in Prague. I think it was last month, month before. So Demetrius was in the room. Paul was talking away to him, Demetrius being the main developer on WinGet. So he'd said himself it was a kind of fair and honest review in terms of what Chocolatey is, what WinGet is, why you would use one and why you would use the other. So if anyone's interested in that, I'll not repeat everything that Paul said. But there was lots of ins and outs, why you want to use one, why you would want to use the other. The upshot was, use what makes sense for you. I mean,
yeah, sure.
Would we want everyone to use Chocolatey? Sure. Does everyone want to use Chocolatey? No. Use what makes sense for you.
WinGet's fairly new, isn't it?
It's reasonably new. It's been around for, I think, just over 2 years now, I think.
Yeah.
So it was out in preview for a little bit, and then you had to enable it to have it installed on your system. Now it comes pretty much baked in. That's one of the big selling points, if you like, of WinGet compared to Chocolatey. It's baked in, whereas Chocolatey is a separate installation.
Now, the packages that you install with Chocolatey are specifically for Chocolatey, like WinGet can install them and vice versa?
So there's a little bit of a gray area there. So to put it in context, so Chocolatey is the package manager, and it needs what I refer to as a nupkeg. Some people call that a new package. It's a nupkeg. It's a fancy zip file that contains the instructions on what you're actually installing.
Right.
WinGet is driven by a set of manifests that are hosted on a GitHub repository. So there's not actually a package as such. It's more of a manifest as this is what you're going to do. So there's a slight difference there in terms of functionally how it works. The reason I said it was a grey area is there is the concept of WinGet UI, which is a user interface that can install packages or applications from WinGet, Chocolatey, and I think Scoop being one of the other package managers that Windows has. So you can, in theory, have a kind of centralized interface for doing things like that. And there is discussions around whether Chocolatey could install WinGet packages. So from Chocolatey, you could define a source that is a WinGet repository and be able to install manifests from there. So there's lots of discussions around this. There was also the new DevBox. Was it DevBox? Is that what it was called? Or Dev tooling, where we could integrate with Chocolatey within the new ecosystem that Microsoft's creating. So there's all sorts of ways that you can have crossover between the two. And that's why I'm saying, use what makes sense for you. Some packages that Chocolatey can install, WinGet at the minute isn't able to because of the way that the package is deployed. It might be a zip file that you need to extract and then do some work on the extracted files. A WinGet manifest at the minute can't handle that level of complexity, whereas a Chocolatey package is at its heart a PowerShell script. So you can do anything that you want or need within the Chocolatey package for getting that application installed.
And we should remind everybody that the name Chocolatey came out of reaction to NuGet, right? NuGet.
It did.
The pun.
There's a long story there that Rob could tell you all the details about. But yes, it came from originally from a joke, a throwaway comment. Yeah. And whatever, 10 years later, 12 years later, Chocolatey's here and still being used. So it's a fun history when you go back to it.
Yeah. Right. Sometimes jokes get out of control.
Exactly.
No, that wouldn't happen here.
When we talked to Rob back in 2020, so admittedly 3 years ago, I think Chocolatey for Business was brand new. Like, it's been an open source project all along, but you had an opportunity to make a commercial component because folks wanted to pay you and get a certain level of service and that kind of thing. Can you sort of get us up to speed? Because it's been 3 years. I'm sure stuff is different.
Yeah, so just a little bit of history there. So as you said, Chocolatey is an open source project. It's been around for since 2011. And then it's grown from there. And then what Rob did is he kind of looked at the landscape, saw where things were. He was working at Puppet at the time. He saw that there was a market for, as you say, support as well as additional functionality. So what he did was he created a Kickstarter and went to see, is there enough interest in this thing that is Chocolatey? The Kickstarter was successful. Off the back of that, Chocolatey Software Inc. came about. And then based on discussions that Rob and I had while I was an open source contributor to Chocolatey, I ended up starting working with him full time, and then since then the team's grown. And what we've been able to do is establish a business features on top of the open source functionality that we provide. So we have what we refer to as the Chocolatey license extension. So that's just it's a Chocolatey package. You install it as a Chocolatey package, and then that opens up other business-like functionality that you might want, whether it's automatically creating packages using Package Builder, whether it's using a central deployment mechanism for packages across all the machines in your environment using Chocolatey Central Management. All of those become available once you start one of the business SKUs, if you like, within Chocolatey.
I guess that's the benefit of being Chocolatey when it comes to developing new versions and products. You can just install that stuff the way you install everything with Chocolatey.
Exactly. I mean, Chocolatey itself is a Chocolatey package. Now, there is a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation there because the initial deployment is a Chocolatey package, but you haven't quite got Chocolatey yet. So there's a little bit of hand holding with manually extracting a zip file to get it installed when you first install it. But
yeah, there's definitely an inception moment when I'm using Chocolatey to install Chocolatey,
that's it.
Right? Like suddenly Leo DiCaprio appears and everything gets really slow.
But one of the common asks, kind of related to that, one of the common asks we've had is, why is there not an MSI for Chocolatey? Why can't I install Chocolatey via an MSI? The original answer to that was, well, it's a Chocolatey package. Why would you want to install it with an MSI?
Yeah.
But recently we have actually created that now. So there is an MSI for Chocolatey, and that's what you can actually do if you wanted to. WinGet install Chocolatey, and that will put Chocolatey on your system using WinGet as the mechanism to deploy it. And that's one of the reasons.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And the reciprocal of that is, if you need to, you can do Choco install WinGet. It works both ways. So,
all right. So you are in your full inception moment there.
Make the bad man stop.
It's beautiful, really.
Yeah.
So we do have 3 years of catching up to do, I imagine, although it seems simple. Like, it's just an installer. Why do you need to work on this so much?
So the core part of the last few years has been about ramping up the team, getting the team up to speed, as well as building into our infrastructure much more testing, much more verification that everything's working the way we expect it to. And on top of that, also doing development work on top of it. So one of the biggest pieces of work that we've been undertaking lately is an upgrade. I hope you're sitting down from this, but it's an upgrade from .NET 4 to .NET 4.8.
What?
Oh yeah. So for the longest time, Chocolatey, one of the driving forces behind Chocolatey, or one of the driving things that Chocolatey is all about, is backwards compatibility and always working the way that people expect it to work.
Right.
So Chocolatey, up to and including version 2.0, which we've recently just released, required as a minimum .NET Framework 4.0, because we wanted to ensure compatibility all the way back to the earlier operating systems that folks were still using.
4.0 having shipped in 2010.
Yep. It's a long tail, but the idea was that we wanted the bare minimum of footprint that was required to install Chocolatey to then allow provisioning of the applications that you want on that machine.
Sure.
So you 351 folks have got to upgrade.
Now you have to, yes. So that undertaking, it was not an easy one. Let's put it that way. There was lots of dependencies. There was lots of changes. That also involved an uplift to, Carl kind of mentioned it earlier in terms of NuGet. Chocolatey itself has a dependency on the NuGet client libraries. So part of the uplift from 1.0 to 2.0 was, well, we are finished with that version of NuGet client libraries that, I don't want to say how old it was. It was quite old, but we have upgraded to the one of the most recent versions of the NuGet client libraries, and with that, that's brought additional functionality that the NuGet team have created and made available for NuGet.exe. So we've now got support for semantic version v2 version numbers. We've got support for other things that we wouldn't have had before doing that uplift. And then more importantly, we've uplifted everything to .NET Framework 4.8. So now as a base, you need 4.8 installed in order to use Chocolatey now, but the time has come.
All right.
Because
refresh my memory, guys, because it's been a while since I used the .NET framework for Windows, the .NET framework. But there was
a version, they're trying to keep side-by-side compatibility the whole time, whereas, you could have multiple versions of the .NET framework all installed in whatever programs using it. But there was one that replaced another, right? Was it 4 that replaced 3.5.1 or?
Yeah, I was thinking about exactly that. It's like, when did we start getting side-by-side execution?
Was it not 4 to 4.5? I don't recall.
I think you're right. I was just thinking, one of the challenges of getting off of 4 is that it didn't allow side-by-side execution. That actually came later.
Yeah, it was a replacement.
Yeah, you always had to replace. And so now, getting up to 4.8 is like, you can do side-by-side execution. It's not that big of a deal.
I thought you could always do side-by-side with the .NET framework, except for that one version that had to replace the existing one because of some dependency reason.
It might have been 1.1, but yeah, I mean, it's always been sort of side-by-side execution, but it was harder or easier. Like, people fought pretty hard to run like 3, 5, and 4 side by side.
Yeah. I'm so used to core now that I don't even remember.
It's just not something you think about anymore, and haven't for a while.
Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things that happened recently, I was at NDC Oslo, and Isaac Levin was doing a talk on all the new things that are in .NET Core and why you want to use it. It was a great talk, but one of the things that he did during it was one of these, put your hands up, who's using .NET 7? And pretty much everyone in the room put up their hands, .NET 7. And he gradually went down and down and down and down. And he got to 4.8, fewer hands. And then he eventually got down to 4.0, and literally no one else in the room said that they were using 4.0. And I was like, yep, I'm still using it. It's in production.
That one guy.
Exactly. So it was time to do it. So the big uplift from 1.0, which was our first, major milestone, was literally the uplift of all of the components or products to 4.8. Because it's not just Chocolatey CLI. There's Chocolatey license extension, Chocolatey agent, Chocolatey GUI license extension. All those components also have to be uplifted at the same time. Indeed. We have been told a couple of times that we misnamed that product. It should have been GUI Chocolatey as opposed to Chocolatey GUI. But
Chocolatey GUI still works. I mean,
it does.
Two adjectives in a row.
That's it.
Yeah, you really don't need to mangle the product too much just for the puns, right?
Yeah, of course.
It gets to a point at some point. But I can see that, there's certainly plenty of folks on 4.8. Like they're not going anywhere. That version of WinForms is pretty solid. There are challenges in getting off of quote unquote standard framework. And if you've got a big dependency on ASP.NET, web forms, if you've got a
Windows forms
dependency on WCF, those are just not simple things to unentangle. So
there are certain Windows graphics libraries that are only available on Windows. I had to use the .NET framework recently for a Screen Tools lib that I did on the .NET show. And the whole idea of this was to automate browser interaction. So you can load up a browser, go full screen, and now it's predictable where things are going to be. So you can search for text with OCR, the Tesseract library, and you can search for graphic, take PNGs and say, hey, do you see this PNG anywhere right here? And then you can simulate clicks and keys, send keys, which is in Windows Forms. So anyway, I ended up using the .NET framework for that, and it was great. I had a great time with that.
Yeah, I wonder if I would have fond memories of 4.8. Like, it's been a while. It's like, oh, does this feel good? Right? I remember, it's just like go back and work in WinForms for a minute.
Yeah, it's cool.
You come to appreciate that WinForms was the exception. Like, no designer is good except for WinForms.
I mean, there's definitely things that, because I work on some kind of other open source projects that have made the jump to .NET Core. Yeah. You come back to working on Chocolatey, which is what I work on full time. Even things like we're still not yet on the new CS Proj format. So we don't have the benefit of, the shrinking of the CS Proj format because we haven't made the jump to building with, .NET Build yet. It's still MS Build that we're using under the hood. So there's elements there that are still, we're working through that path to get onto the newer, tooling to allow us to get the benefits that come with it. But for the minute, we're still, so if you've got some of our CS Proj files are quite big, right? But it's the way they are. We can't change them quite yet. Because again, one of the tenets of Chocolatey is that it's it continues to work. It continues to be backwards compatible as much as we can. So we have to pick and choose our battles in terms of what we're looking to upgrade to. And as you say, I mean, .NET Framework 4.8, it's stable. It does what it does. You can still code against it. Do you miss some of the new shiny features that are coming out in .NET Core? Absolutely. But it's still functional. It does what it does. It's tried and tested. So, although we've had discussions around what needs to happen in terms of bringing Chocolatey CLI to .NET Core, that's not something we're planning yet. I mean, it's something we're starting to speak about. Some of the folks in the community, are speaking about it and kind of dipping their toes in the water. And in fact, one of the core contributors to the uplift to .NET 4.8 and the new NuGet client libraries, it was a open source contributor that was doing that work. I know that he's spiked out what needs to happen in terms of bringing Chocolatey to .NET Core.
Right.
But there are some of the complexities in terms of how we do things with reflection and app domains and things when we load in the license extension.
Right.
That becomes complicated in .NET Core because some of that was taken away, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
Again, we have to figure out how we can do all the things that we currently do in that new environment as well. So it's been an interesting time.
So Gary, sometimes when you want to install an executable in Windows, just having the executable to install, just having the installer requires that you're, logged in and you went through a process and you downloaded this thing. In other words, it's not publicly available for anybody to just go to that vendor's website and download it, which is the modern way to do it, right? Just make the download free. And then when you set it up, that's when you register and put in your serial numbers and all that. Does Chocolatey require that these packages are public? Or can I make a package out of my own exe that I had gotten through that means?
So there's lots of things in there, so let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So, Chocolatey as a product or as an application in its own right, Chocolatey will let you package whatever you want. So if that's your own exe, that's your proprietary exe that requires licenses to install it, etc., Chocolatey will allow you to create a nutkeg or a new package that represents that package, and that will allow you to install it as you need to. Where it kind of crosses over into what's allowed and what's not allowed is if you then try to take that package and push it to Chocolatey community repository.
Yeah, sure.
Then that wouldn't be allowed because at that point you're violating the terms of that application or the proprietary license that goes with that. So that's where the double-edged sword that is package moderation that we have. We've got automated systems that kick in for doing validation, verification, scanning of viruses, etc. And then there's a human moderator at the end of it as well. At the point that the human moderator came along, they would likely say, we can't take this package because it's got a proprietary exe in it, the license doesn't allow for redistribution, etc., etc., etc. But the nice thing about Chocolatey is there's nothing to stop you taking that nutkeg and hosting it in your own internal repository. So you could use Nexus or Artifactory or ProGet and have your own internal repository of packages that you would use in conjunction with the Chocolatey community repository. So you would still be able to do Choco install your package, but it would only live within your environment and not anywhere else.
Oh, could I use a private repository, like a private GitHub repository, something along those lines that I could install it from the internet, so I wouldn't have to have it locally on my machine?
So the term repository is one of those overused terms. It means lots of things to lots of people.
Do you actually mean file share?
Yeah, sure.
What I'm referring to there is a repository that has a NuGet v2 or a NuGet v3 endpoint associated with it. So an OData endpoint or a JSON endpoint that allows you to query for those packages and then download and install them.
Got it.
So that's when I said Nexus provides a repository that does all of that, and then you install it in-house, you host it in-house, and you can push and pull all your packages from there.
All right, that's cool.
GitHub does have a GitHub package repository, so you can host NuGet packages on there. The only slight drawback with that is it does require, but it maybe fits into your scenario, is it does require authentication.
Sure.
Whereas a Nexus repository, you can have anonymous authentication to it within your environment. So no, you absolutely could do that, but it's not a repository in the sense of a Git repository. It would be a NuGet v2 or a NuGet v3 repository that would have those packages on it.
So what is your recommended way for having a local repository within an organization?
So my go-to one, the one that we have that question comes up quite a lot of times, and we don't say that this is the golden standard. This is the one that you will use.
And there isn't a Chocolatey repository.
There's not. The one that probably describes it best, ProGet has the concept of making a dissemination with whether it's a NuGet package or whether it's a Chocolatey package.
Right.
But at its heart, it's only really it's wording. It's not. There's nothing really to distinguish without really looking at it that this is a NuGet package and this is a Chocolatey package. Right. But ProGet does at least try to separate those two things in terms of what you're trying to set up. But like I say, Nexus, Artifactory, ProGet all provide in-house and then repositories, but there's other systems like Cloudsmith or Feeds.io or I hesitate to say MyGet because I don't know if you saw MyGet went away for like 2 days and it had a complete blackout. But MyGet back in the day was the go-to standard for online hosting of packages.
And then they scared everybody.
Yes. So in terms of the question, I mean, it depends on how you want to set it up. ProGet needs a SQL Server instance behind it because that's where it stores it.
Right.
Our Nexus does it via Java database under the hood that's running in process. So it kind of depends on your environment where you want to host it. But there's definitely ways that you can do it. And then at that point, you've then got your own curated list of packages that have been sanctioned by your ops team living in your internal environment, but you've still got access to the Chocolatey community repository if you wanted to install the packages from there.
Right. I mean, yeah, then I have enough of a tinfoil hat on to go to say, hey, if I'm operating an infrastructure, I want control over all those packages, so we're going to use my repository. At the same time, it's like, that's also a lot of overhead to keep those up to date, test and so forth. Like, let's go tap common repositories. Like, do you see any real patterns around this? Should you really only be using the private repository for private software and commercial, open repositories for retail software, that other people are maintaining?
You kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of once you kind of own a package, there's an element of background work that needs to happen to keep that package up to date. So how do you do that?
You own the puppy. Don't let the puppy pee on the floor.
So one of the great things about Chocolatey is the Chocolatey community that help keep the over 10,000 packages that we have up to date with the newest package versions, etc. Lots of packages use an updating system called AU. So within I think the normal schedule is about 6 hours. So within 6 hours, typically a package that's using AU will have been updated automatically by scraping the website, knowing that there's a new website available, push out a new version, and it's updated. So as an organization, you might want to take advantage of that. You might want to know when a package has been updated on the community repository to then pull it into your own internal environment because you want to bring it into your DMZ, you want to install it, you want to make sure that it does what it does, etc., and then make it available to everyone within your organization.
Right.
So what we see folks doing is using some business functionality that we provide. So we've got a system called Package Internalizer that will take a package from a community, say a community repository, download it, and it will go through a process of internalization. So what do I mean by that? A Chocolatey package normally is, when you break it down, it is a PowerShell script that is a list of instructions. It's go to this URL, download this exe, run this exe, do a bunch of other stuff, and then finish. But from an IT perspective, you've then got a dependency on that external URL. So what the package internalizer allows you to do is it will find the URL, it'll go and download that exe, and then it will rebundle the exe into the nupkeg. So then you've got what we refer to as an embedded package. So that embedded package, that nupkeg, has everything that you need to install that application offline, completely offline.
Right.
Which means it may have gone and gotten more things if there are external dependencies.
So yes, the package internalizer will say, I want to install Notepad++, but Notepad++ needs these dependencies in order to make it work. So Package Internalizer would download and internalize each of those dependencies. So what you get at the end of that is 4, 5, 6 nupkegs that you then put onto your internal repository.
Right.
Once you've gone through your due diligence on your DMZ, you make sure it installs what you want to install, etc. You then promote it into your internal repository, and at that point, all of your other machines have access to it. Yeah. So you're taking advantage of the community repository being maintained and updated, but you're still working in essentially isolation with your ops hat on, as you said, knowing what you're installing, but also having to take advantage of all of that work and use some of the business features to keep your repository up to date.
Very cool. And with that, I'm going to ask you guys to hold on for just a second while we pause for these very important messages. And we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell. And that's Gary Ewan Park. We're talking Chocolatey. And Richard, you look like you had a question, but if you didn't,
I was going to say, why haven't you made a repository service then? Like, because you've done everything else.
So it's something that we've spoken about. It's not something that we have committed to, but we have heard it from some of our customers that they want that system that we can currently do, but they want someone else to do it for them. They want to have all of the package internalized. They want to have the package available. They want to have a commitment in terms of SLAs, in terms of when they'll be available once the applications have been released. The short answer is there's quite a lot of infrastructure behind that. There's quite a lot of there's certifications that we as a company would need to have in order to provide that service, etc. So it is a goal. But it's not a goal that it's not tomorrow. Let's put it that way.
Right. Sure. I also see there's a SaaS product here, right? It's like, we'll run the repository for you. We'll even maintain a certain level of update. We could provide update services for you. Like, not that I'm pretty sure we're off the rails for a .NET Rocks, but from a run-as perspective, I'm like, I could see this.
So what I can say is, like, in terms of what we currently got in terms of the infrastructure for our open source repository that is Chocolatey Community Repository, we have some of the building blocks. And in terms of the functionality that's been added into the business version of Chocolatey, we have the building blocks that you can stitch all these things together and run it in your own environment. But we could absolutely provide that as you say, a SaaS offering or something. But we're not quite there in terms of getting to that level, but maybe one day is what I can say there.
Yeah, it's a reasonable speculation. And, I know you listen to .NET Rocks, so there's been an ongoing theme of how do open source projects become self-funding, self-sustainable.
Very popular topic.
You've had several years of Chocolatey for Business, which I think you charge a fair price for, and I suspect you've got some customers for it. Like, is that carrying the ball these days? Are you guys okay?
Yeah, I mean, we've been busy. I mean, COVID obviously had its impacts, and there was ripples that we saw going through it. But I mean, yeah, we're hiring folks at the minute. The team is growing. It's continuing to pay my mortgage, which is what I'm here for.
Yeah,
so
that feature.
It's kind of what I need, right?
That's great.
But no, we're happily working away. We're getting new customers coming in. We were featured on Linus Tech Tips, showcased us recently and showed off what Chocolatey is and how it can be used. And we saw a flurry of people coming in. So yeah, people hear about us. People we've got the support team is very good at what they do. They've got a very much a white glove approach. They'll get on a call with you. They'll help you set it up. We've got what we refer to as a quick setup process where we'll spin up a VM in Azure that has Chocolatey and all of the business components installed for you. So you can take that for a spin, see whether you like it, and then you can either continue with it in the cloud or you could bring it on premise. So no, we're busy at the minute. There's no shortage. There's no shortage of things to do. There's not enough hours in the day, unfortunately.
Did you use the word Linux in some award that you got? Was it Linux or?
Well, it's Linus Tech Tips.
Linus out of Vancouver, by the way.
Okay. Because it's for Windows and Linux has its own package.
Linus Tech Tips is a show.
Yeah, I got
Correct.
it now.
So to clarify that though, so Chocolatey is a Windows package manager, but it is compiled under Mono. So it can run on Linux and it can run on Mac. But then why would you want to do that?
Yeah, because they have their own package. Yeah.
So, but a lot of people, depending on their workflows, they might be creating an application and they want to bundle it as a Chocolatey package. So you would install Chocolatey on Linux. You would run the chocopack command and the chocopush command because the rest of your build has happened on Linux or Mac. You just want to do that last part, which is to move it over. That's why we produce, there's a Docker image available for Chocolatey. So you can Docker pull Chocolatey, and then at that point you can be running Chocolatey on your Mac, depending on what you're doing. So there's definitely a use case for it, but it's not, you certainly wouldn't do Choco install Visual Studio Code on a Mac, because that wouldn't work.
I think on the Mac you might have to call it something like Toblerone. For Rocher or whatever.
Yeah, they are the luxury tech brand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty funny. So, what do we need to know? Other features, things you're working on, places people should be looking?
So there's been some interesting work developed in terms of Chocolatey just in the recent times. So we have made some additional extension points. So Chocolatey's always had this concept of extensions. That's how the Chocolatey license extension works. But in the recent releases of Chocolatey, we've included some additional functionality for providing extension points for additional, what we refer to as source runners, as well as providing mechanisms to do validations. So what I'm referring to there is that we might, at the minute, Chocolatey supports source runners for installing Windows features. It installs source runners for, or not installing, but enabling or disabling Windows features, for installing Ruby packages, for installing Python packages. But there are other obvious sources that we would want to have support for as well. We kind of spoke about it earlier, one of them being WinGet as a source, .NET Global Tools as a source. Windows Store as a source. So then you've kind of got this single pane of glass in terms of doing Choco install all the things, as well as then doing Choco export all the things. So then you want to take this machine and you want to put it over here. You can do a Choco export of everything that's on your machine, and then immediately do a Choco install of everything and put it onto that other machine.
Is that the mythological just read my configuration and make a copy of it?
That's the one.
Yeah. And I say mythological for a reason, because the number of times I've heard the statement, we can't do that. That's not a thing.
So there's obviously caveats to that. There's certain things we can't do, but Chocolatey has knowledge of quite a bit of your system because it's responsible for putting a lot of things onto your system. So taking that and making that an exportable artifact to then bring over to this machine and then just install it, that's something that's happening. We're currently working on a new version of our product, Chocolatey Central Management. So that's the single pane of glass visualization of all the things that are installed on your machines across your environment. So there's a new version of that currently being worked on. So that's the one that allows you to say, there's a new version of Notepad++. I need to install it on 50 machines. Within Chocolatey Central Management, you create a deployment, and then it'll just push it out to all the machines and do the upgrade. And it just goes.
Just trying to levelize all the versions of Acrobat in a given organization. Like, my Lord.
That's it.
There's a philosophical conversation here about when is an application, right? Like, if I could literally go to a machine that's never seen Chocolatey before, install some piece of Chocolatey and say, okay, give me a manifest for this machine. You're essentially detecting what's an application. I mean, going to program and features is probably not enough.
You should run Windy Bloat first, though.
That's true. So that's one of the interesting things about what a Chocolatey package is, a standard format. It's a nupkeg, it's a zip file, it has some additional metadata. But what you put into that Chocolatey package is completely up to you. You could put an exe, an MSI, you could put a PowerShell script that deploys a registry key. You could put an exe, a standalone exe. You could put just the one that I always give as an example is I've got a Chocolatey package for my Git config, because I never remember what that is. But I want the same Git config on every single machine. So I just do Choco install get13 Git config, and then it runs the Git commands to set up my machine.
Yeah, that is not an app.
That's not an app. But the benefit of doing it as a Chocolatey package is when I do Choco list, I'll see that package was installed. I'll see what version it was, and I'll know what version of my Git config I have installed on that machine. So when something doesn't work the way I want it to, I haven't upgraded my Git config. So I can do Choco upgrade get13 git config, and I've got the right thing in play. So by packaging it all up into that standard format, you can literally put anything in there you want. It doesn't have to be an application. It's a package, because Chocolatey is a package manager. It manages packages that just happen to install applications.
Often are applications, but not always.
Correct. It doesn't have to be. It could be placing a document on a folder somewhere.
And I suspect we've talked about this before, but literally you can set up a set of packages that says, I need my dev install on this machine. It's not the whole machine. It's just like the things I do for dev, go get those.
Exactly.
And that's a bunch of different products and a bunch of configurations. and off we go.
And like I say, at that point, you then know what version of that configuration package was deployed.
Right.
You know what version of that application package was installed. And then you've got that, again, I've said it again, that pane of glass, that single pane of glass about knowing what is deployed on your system, as opposed to just relying on add remove programs. Because that's one of the things that we do within one of the business features is that we'll add entries into add remove programs when a Chocolatey package is installed.
Oh, interesting.
So if you happen to be using another reporting tool to say what's installed on a machine, you get better visibility by installing it as a Chocolatey package, because we'll add an entry into add remove programs for the package.
So you actually have a programs and features entry that says my GitHub configuration number 13.
Yep.
Slick.
And if you hit uninstall on that entry in add remove programs, it'll run Choco uninstall that package.
Right.
But again, depending on what reporting tools you're using, you get better visibility by installing via Chocolatey, because it will report on the packages in the same way that it's getting information about all the other applications that are installed.
And just to be very clear, can Chocolatey detect that there is software already installed on this machine that it didn't deploy through a package?
Yes.
Okay. For certain things.
So what we do there, so there's a whole myriad of conversation
there's going to be a ton of exceptions here.
But essentially, so if you were to do Choco List, it will give you a list of packages that are installed.
Right.
But if you do Choco List -- include programs, I think it is, it'll give you a list of here's the packages that are installed, but here are all the entries and add remove programs that I don't know about.
Right.
And then if you wanted to, in the business version, you could do a Choco Sync. And it will take that application and move it under Chocolatey's management to then allow you to continue upgrading that package with Chocolatey by syncing the two things together.
All right. Now, and then literally I want to play the spooky music here. Like you transformed the relationship to that piece of software. That's really interesting.
So, like I said, that one's an interesting one when you get into it, because not all entries in add remove program actually represent a single package. Because there might be multiple entries in there that are all one package. So there's some caveats there, and you have to take care of what you're doing there. But essentially, you can bring a application that's installed on your machine under Chocolatey's management through Choco Sync command. Yes. Now, there are also ways of doing it in the open source version, but again, we provide that functionality in the business version to make it easier for folks.
Yeah, and it's very fair to say, like, use this with caution.
Yes.
It's good to get started with, but you're going to be way happier if you just get into the routine of always using Choco packages.
Starting from scratch. Exactly that. And then there's, because then Chocolatey is the package manager, but then you build on top of that with some form of configuration management system. So whether you're using a Puppet, a Chef, an Ansible, you use that to help deploy across your environment as well. So we like to say that Chocolatey will work with everything. We have tie-ins and add-ins for the majority of the configuration management systems out there, but at the end of the day, it is just an EXE. So if you can shell out to an EXE and do that work, you can do that through any sort of endpoint management system that you want to use.
Do you get any pushback from folks that not wanting 4.8 around? Like, just make this run in core?
No, we haven't seen too much of that since the release. So we released back in, where are we now? We released in May. So we had a few months, and we haven't had much pushback from a 4.8 perspective. No.
So the fours are willing to go 4.8.
Yes.
It's really a question of, hey, we've been living in core. Why are you asking me to have standard framework on these machines?
There's that. Yes, exactly. There's definitely, so that's the double-edged sword. So we picked 4.8 because it's the stable version. It's the one they're not going anywhere else.
It's the last version.
The last one. So we've pulled up to that one, and some parts we've made compatible, if you like, as we move to .NET Core. So we put ourselves in a good position to make that jump up to the next version. But as is always the case, there were things that came up after the 2.0 release that we had to immediately fix. So there was things that we had to work through, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But there are still, like I say, there are still plans ultimately to move it to .NET Core to get all of those advantages that come with it. But at the same time, we know that there are folks using Windows Server 2012, and they still an older version of PowerShell, and they still want things to work. So there was an interesting story where I had to dig into the internals of PowerShell 3 with the system management assemblies because it didn't work properly on Windows Server 2012. It worked fine on Windows Server 2016. So it's, we know that folks are still there. So again, we want to continue to support them and make the chocolate available to them so they can pin onto 1.x of Chocolatey rather than making the jump to 2.x if they wanted to, because we are supporting both at the minute.
Yeah, 2012 comes out of support like now.
We're waiting. We've got a checklist to say when it finally comes off, but yeah.
Gary, what's the difference between the free version and the pro version? The pro version is $100 a year, I think, right?
Correct. So the pro version came about from the Kickstarter. So if you wanted to be a Kickstarter and you wanted to help the project grow, the pro version was the de facto way of doing that. It was a way of saying, I want to support you, and here are some of the features. So some of the business features are available in that professional version, but there are levels. It goes up from there. So there's certain features in the pro version, but other versions, they provide more features on top of that. So for instance...
So I guess I'm asking, what are those features? Because, try to convince me to spend the money.
So absolutely. I mean, there are different SKUs of Chocolatey. There's the free version, obviously. There's the pro version, and then there's the business version. So as a pro customer who just wanted to have some additional features on top of that, there are things like additional PowerShell functions. So we provide in the open source version a bunch of commandlets that allow you to install Chocolatey packages. But in the pro version, there are advanced PowerShell commandlets for doing things like installing and managing Windows services. So if you wanted to create packages that install the Windows service, the Chocolatey package commandlets can help with that.
Nice.
There's package reducer. It's kind of a big one. Windows out of the box is reasonably bloated, going back to your WinDebloat you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
So you end up with you download an MSI, you run the MSI, it puts a bunch of files over here, and then it drops other stuff over here. The end result is you've maybe got that same MSI and the same EXEs living all over the place. So Package Reducer attempts to reduce the number of files that are extracted and the number of files that are dropped in your file system. So again, it just automatically does that for you. Package Throttle, that was an interesting feature that some folks wanted in the professional version, but they're maybe working on a limited bandwidth environment. So they don't want Chocolatey to take all of the bandwidth when it's downloading packages.
Sure.
So you can actually throttle it at a certain level for the bandwidth that's being used by Chocolatey. Runtime malware protection. Out of the box with Chocolatey open source, when someone pushes a package to Chocolatey community repository, we will scan that contents of that package through VirusTotal. But if you wanted to have runtime installation time protection against what's being installed, you can configure your own generic virus scanner and have that do a scan on the package before it gets installed on your machine. The CDN cache, that's a big one. As I mentioned before, when I spoke about package internalizer, one of the reason you want to do package internalizer is that sometimes the URL that you downloaded that MSI from goes away.
Right.
It changed. It gets redirected, so it doesn't work anymore. So the CDN cache is our way of saying we'll keep a copy of that MSI or that EXE. So with the licensed version, the pro version, you'll always have access to that EXE or that MSI rather than it going away and being photo forward. There's other things, different pricing for students, etc. So there's quite a few features in there.
Yeah, those are good features.
And we're always looking to what we can bring in. So we're starting to see some of the features that we've got in the business version. We are looking to see them kind of trickling down into the pro version as well, because we've had them, we've established them, and now we've got bigger and better features in some of the other business offerings. So we are starting to think about what features can we bring down into the pro version as well. So it is something we are looking at. Absolutely.
How many machines can I manage with the pro version?
It's 8, up to 8.
Oh, cool.
The important thing there is it's kind of hard to say this, but we don't monitor that because we can't monitor that. Chocolatey doesn't phone home.
Yeah.
We've got no way of saying that you've only got it on 8 machines rather than 80. So there's nothing to stop you installing it on more than 8. We wouldn't want you to do that. We wouldn't encourage that. But yeah, the license is for up to 8 machines within your own.
But this feels like a family service. Like I've got
exactly,
because if you've got 8 workstations for yourself, you've got issues.
You've got issues.
But if you have a family where everybody's got a computer, at least a laptop each, like as the family administrator, this is a nice service for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that once you have it and once you have it up and running, it can be as simple as Choco Upgrade All on all those machines. So
and
you're dropping in
off
past,
it goes.
You're dropping in past your mum's house, you're dropping in past your auntie's house, Choco Upgrade All while you're there, and it's done. So
that's fine. Yeah.
It's quite appealing once you've got it set up. Once you've done that initial upfront work of knowing what packages you want, etc., you're in a position to keep them up to date. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where stuff like throttle and so forth would help because,
yes,
I've got a family member with limited bandwidth, so
exactly.
let's take it easy on them, that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely, it sounds pro-ish. I am a family IT administrator kind of
exactly.
thing. Right?
I mean, we all get those questions at Christmas time, and can you just fix this for me while you're here?
I'm so glad you're here. You get to eat my meatloaf, but first, can you fix my printer?
Exactly, that's it.
I used to have that T-shirt. No, I will not fix your printer.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the math makes sense at $96 a year because it's $1,650 per machine when you go business, and 8 machines would be like $130. So, like, it's a reasonable deal. Although, let's face it, like $16 per machine for C4B is not that expensive. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
For a way to keep your machines up to date, orderly, and have a pane of glass that sees what's going on with them, like, this is a good product.
And one of the things that comes with it, once you have enough seats as well, it's the support aspect as well. You can phone up the support team. We've got a very quick turnaround in terms of getting back to folks. And as I said, we've got that kind of white glove approach in terms of bringing them up to speed and knowing what they want to do with it and making sure that Chocolatey is what they need in their environment. So yeah, definitely encourage people to reach out if they're interested in.
For sure.
I mean, we're everywhere. We're on the Discords. We're on I was going to say Twitter, but it's not Twitter anymore. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
But, absolutely.
It's amazing how broken all that has gotten. Like,
it doesn't even bear thinking about. It really doesn't.
it's agonizing, really.
Makes me sad. All right, Gary, what's next for you?
For me, more chocolatey stuff at the minute. But I am, an avid contributor to open source projects, so I've got a to-do list that is growing and growing and growing. I just need to find time to get round to it, but I am heading over to SweatUG, a conference over in Sweden in October, so looking forward to speaking at that one. But yeah, other than that, just spending time with the kids and the family and generally just loving life. So
yeah,
sounds good. Well, keep on doing that chocolatey thing. It's great.
Thanks very much.
All right, and we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and, of course, in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a